We have amazing creative leaders here that we need to ask many different types of questions. And the first type of question is kind of interesting. We've all seen these AI pilots that never go away, right? The idea of separating out AI people that try from AI people that use. So I think the question here is what does usable AI mean to you? And I'm going to start off with Tim.
I think for me, usable AI is really about where you get ROI in the business. And, it doesn't just mean revenue. For us, we're really focused on time. And so I think the goal of AI is to take time out of process. And when you can get that back, it's very valuable. But what works for me, maybe usable AI for me isn't necessarily usable AI for others. I think that's kind of the question you have to ask yourself is like, what is your key goal you're trying to get out and how can AI help you get there?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, like, sort of segueing onto that, like, Jenny, what do you think?
Yeah, usable AI, I think, is just something that lives beyond the demo. Like anybody can make the demo, and it's very easy to say, like, wow, that's amazing. But I think something that's genuinely usable is something that people reach for day to day that actually makes either their jobs easier or makes them more empowered to do different things. And that's what really separates it from like this flashy demo that you might see.
Right. I mean, like, so does that happen at Clay, perhaps, Sniffer, or do you have a larger idea of that?
Yeah, at Clay we say make it work, then make it great is one of our kind of operational principles, and kind of the way we think about it is a little bit like it needs to get the job done. And that's like the most important part. And then you also need to be able to tell a little bit how it's getting the job done, so that if it's not doing the job right, you can go back and fix it. And the third part is actually being able to iterate on it and configure it.
Yeah, I mean, like, from a design perspective, what's the biggest usability mistake AI teams sort of make? Jenny?
Yeah. I mean, one big one that I actually don't know if we have great solutions for yet, even, is like the blank page problem. I think today AI is already capable of so much, but we actually don't always know the right balance of how to show that to people and introduce that to people. It's sometimes really easy to show them a use case that is much too simple. Like I think about how a few years ago, every example was like, make a meeting summary or like generate, some sort of like poem or memo. And that didn't fully capture what it was really capable of doing. But at the same time, if you show people really advanced use cases, it can be very intimidating or alienating in a way where that might not actually be what somebody might use from it. So it's such a diverse technology that I think it can almost be hard to show people how they might use it best in their context.
Yeah, so, Nefer, what Jenny's basically saying, when you design for, teams and operators, what instantaneously turns them off, with the AI tool?
Yeah, kind of going back to what I was saying before, they need to be able to see what's happening. If they can't see what's happening, they're not going to be able to trust in the tool. They're not going to have the transparency they need.
So in that particular case in point, so how does design an AI for people who don't think in prompts and, I would say, tokens or models? How does that work?
Sorry, can you phrase that a different way?
So yeah, I mean, in regards to when you're designing for people who don't think about prompts and tokens and models, how do you design for them? Because you're sort of like, you don't want to instantaneously turn them off.
Totally, yeah. Well, you want to make it approachable, so you want to like give them sort of like examples of the kind of use cases they can actually that actually apply to them. So some degree of that is getting to know them a little bit, and actually personalizing those kinds of onboarding materials. But then they also just generally need to be able to see what's happening in the system. If we're thinking about Clay actually helps you automate ideas and GTM motions, well, they need to be able to see what's currently running, what's operating, and they need to be able to intervene, even if they're not super technical.
And so, with that, does that happen with you, Jenny? And just to add to that specific question, what does sort of good friction versus bad friction look like in the sort of UX, the user experience area of AI?
Yeah. So one thing that I've sort of observed even in like the last year, which feels like such a long time in AI, is that the sort of like where your users are at and what they understand is a very quickly moving target. So what I mean by that is like even some of these things, it's like, do people understand tokens? Do they understand memory? Do they understand context? Like where we're at with that. Like a year ago, I would have said like, oh, we can't ever reveal any of those things to the users. It's way too intimidating. But today, where people are at, especially in where people who are using a lot of like the professional tools for work, for professional AI tools for work, like they are, with a lot of Anthropic's tools, they actually kind of understand those things now, and they're motivated to understand those things now. So I personally, as a designer, my philosophy is like, oh, we actually should treat those people like they're smart people, and that they should understand what these concepts are. And so it's actually kind of good friction to show them and teach them like, yeah, this is what context means. This is how tokens are being used. These are concepts that will all help you like build and make you better at using these tools for your work. Even though, yeah, they can be a little hard to learn at first.
Yeah. So in regards to aspects of purchase, from an executive level, like Tim, how do you measure AI, worth, being truly adopted versus, just being purchased?
Well, I think for us, it goes back again to what's the value that we're getting out of this. And when we look across the departments, readiness isn't an organizational question. You can't just throw AI onto an entire organization. We look at it department by department. The product team, the marketing team, they may be more forward deployed on different AI tools, but the accounting team may take a few steps to get there. And so what we're looking at really is, from an ROI, are these tools actually making us faster, making us better as a business?
Yeah, more efficient.
Yeah, and
Right.
I think one thing too that's overlooked is that the value that you get out is often with how much time and learning you put into it, because it's a behavior change.
Right.
It often doesn't fail on the technology side; it fails on the user side, being comfortable with an interface that's new and different from what they've been using
Right.
for 30 years.
Yeah. And so that's like, the aspect of onboarding, right? The onboarding approach is to be seen as a very important factor. And, my question to Nafar in this particular case is really how important is onboarding versus product design itself? I mean, it is kind of design orientated and experience, but can
Totally,
you
yeah.
sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the earlier question you were asking me, right? Which is about like there's some folks who are a little more technical and other folks who are a little bit more novice, or maybe they're not quite on board yet. And so what we want to do is design products that actually meet the spectrum of customers that come to us. And for folks who are not as technical, we use things like onboarding wizards and kind of templates to help them get started. But for really everyone, including the more technical people, it's really important for us to design those small conceptual primitives in a way that really makes sense. And it goes back to what Jenny was saying, like we need to make these terms like tokens and stuff like that really simple and understandable as well.
Yeah, but with that, with the aspects of onboarding, onboarding can be seen in sort of different ways and different types of experiences. And so, what role does training and internal storytelling provide, in the adoption, Tim?
Well, I think a lot of it's steps. You mentioned like the AI summaries. That's a really great step when people come into a conference call, and right afterwards the notes just go to them. You've made the interface invisible. You get the value, but you don't have to do any work, and so that provides some level of confidence for everyone to say, okay, these AI tools are starting to catch up here. But then I think there's another level you go to that the forward deployed teams, like we have our CTO on Thursdays, he wears mittens and he does no hands development. And he's learning to interface from the model in a much more human-centric way, where he doesn't take a keyboard and a mouse that is, caveman technology from 100 years ago. We're now in an era that the context of the conversation can be fully understood by an AI interface. And so he's really trying to just walk into a room and talk to develop. And so that difference between the AI summary and the fully autonomous kind of as fast as you talk, it creates, there's a lot of steps there to onboard different departments in the organization.
Yeah. I mean, you did bring up the aspects of AI visibility, and I think for the whole group, should AI be visible as AI, or should it sort of disappear into the workflow? I mean, take your time.
I personally, I think it should be invisible. Our tagline is content, the speed of thought. That as fast as you can have an idea, you could create the visual equivalent. And I think that visual language is so profound. You look across cultures and countries, emojis are the most known language across all of them.
Right.
And it's because it comes with the kit when you're born. You have a visual processor that's incredibly good. And so we're really looking at ways that how could the tools be discreetly behind the scenes, and you just create visuals from ideas. I think that's really the winning ticket.
Anyone add to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think if we looked back 2, 3 years ago and we looked at how we were doing AI product development and AI design back then, everything had the little sparkle on it. And I think if we took that same approach today, like, I work on Claude and I work on Cowork, like every single piece of the UI would be that sparkle. And I understand why we did it at that point in time, because there was an eagerness to say and try and be like, oh yeah, I want to try and understand what AI is and I want to bring it into my work. But it's quickly becoming very ubiquitous in the ways that products are built upon. And so I think similar to the ways that there was basically ML backing behind certain features in the past, and we never just said, hey, this is ML. I think, that we don't need to tell people that everything is AI anymore, because it is just becoming a fundamental way in which computers sort of interact with us, the same way that, when you click a button, it hits the API and like it reads or writes something. Like, we're not telling you this is hitting the API. It's just a part of the technology that we use today.
Yeah. In the floor?
I generally tend to agree with that. And also, I think another frame on it that's really interesting is like, I do think context matters quite a bit, right? If the AI that you're using has a high degree of confidence that's going to like hit thing correctly and it's going to do the job perfectly, then maybe it can be less visible. But the moment people start to lose a little trust in it, we need to have some degree of progressive disclosure so you can actually dive deeper and actually, maybe if you're a tinkerer, get under the hood and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, the aspect of the awesome power, that AI has and may have over the course of time is actually quite interesting. But how do you balance that power and simplicity without overwhelming a non-technical user or just a user in general? I mean, Jenny, what do you think about that?
Yeah. How do we balance power and simplicity? One thing that I think about a lot is the saying, I think it's from Alan Kay, who was like an early technologist, and it's like, make the simple things simple and the complex things possible. And I think about that a lot with the work tools that we design, where it should be super easy for you to do the super easy thing, like create the meeting notes or whatever. But if you want, you're able to extend that experience with things like, we have skills, we have all these like other commands and plugins and whatnot, in order to just like get the most out of the AI. And so I think about, how do we like build, similar to what I said earlier, like how do we like build these concepts on top of each other and make it very clear like what their specific purposes are in interacting with the model, in order for people to just really get the most out of it. But if you just want to chat with the AI, you can do that too. Like, that is possible and easy and fast.
Yeah. So Tim, we were talking a little earlier about your sort of workflows. I mean, how do you, deal with that? How do you deal with the aspects of balancing power and the simplicity without, overwhelming a specific user?
Well, I think that, like I was saying, that we have different levels of users in the organization, and what I find is the most balanced way to start with it is to use it as a request engine. And so you're going in, you're asking it to do things, and it feels very familiar. It's very Google. You know, you just go in and search for the thing that you're looking for. But I think as you get more advanced with it and start trusting it and letting that power unleash, use it as a recommendation engine and say, hey, you know what? Why don't you give me all of my options before I ask the question? And I think what we're seeing with OpenClaw and some of the other things that are now, they're augmenting humans in a way that it's that recommendation is there every step of the way. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about using that? That's going to be an interesting time in AI.
Yeah, in a very suggestive manner, right? I mean, we're getting to a sort of point in our conversation where I think it's going to be like a rapid fire, on practical advice. And so, in sort of concise answers that, very quick and short, what's one signal your AI product is actually working? Can you sort of like determine that?
I think when you stop talking about it as an AI product,
Yeah, that sort of visibility
Yeah.
just seeps back in.
instead of the AI summary, it's just taking notes. And
Do you think it becomes like an employee as such?
I think it just stops being so significant that it's AI doing it. Because there's a lot of other technologies that help us along the way. Like you said, the ML is a really great example of that.
Yeah.
Been using that for years, but we don't brand it as that.
And so do you think the sort of like term agentic will sort of just turn off? Jenny?
Ooh, maybe. Yeah, I think it might just be the default way in which we interact with AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like from utilizing Claude, what's one feature that sounds impressive you have that but rarely drives usage? Do you have anything like that?
Ooh, I don't
Put you on the spot.
I know that's very on the spot. I don't know, because I actually think what is really interesting is what impresses me on a daily basis is seeing people push these capabilities to use cases I've never imagined of. So sometimes there are features that I personally don't use very much, but then I see somebody else out there use it in a very powerful way. And often I don't even think about it in terms of like the number of people using it. I think about like what is the most impressive thing somebody else has done with it, even if it's not used very often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like we can sort of leapfrog on from that particular point, Nefer, like, what one design principle that every AI team actually should adopt in 2026 and potentially beyond, what would that be?
I mean, you definitely need to design AI first at this point. Like every single feature you're developing, just like making sure that you're thinking about how does it work agentically from the beginning. But also, I would say like start by actually building out the functionality and see if it actually works first. And if it doesn't, you need to find a fallback. But that would be my recommendation for the approach.
So with that point, is it more like play? Are you playing around?
It is. It's actually like it's actually more like R&D, like technical R&D, making sure that things functionally work. Because historically, we've actually used software to actually go do the work that it's basically deterministic. It runs a certain set of steps procedurally, but agents are going to do whatever the heck they want, actually, right? And so you just need to make sure that it's going to work functionally.
So they're playing more than you're playing.
Yeah. Well, at this point, maybe.
And so, we only got 45 seconds, but maybe we can get this in, So like in one sentence, what's the difference between AI hype and AI habit? Go, Tim.
I think AI hype is the press release saying we're using AI, and AI habit is it's embedded in the workflow, and we don't even talk about it.
Fantastic, Jenny.
Yeah, it's not a demo. People use it for a wide range of use cases. That's not just this one shiny thing.
Nefer?
AI hype is following cash. I think you should follow impact instead, and cash will follow impact.
Well, you've heard it from this wonderful panel. Can you give them a round of applause? Thank you so much.